Well, it seems like we are getting a crossover between Dr. Slump and Dragon Ball. That is a great thing for fans of Toriyama all around. So without wasting any more time, let's get straight into this video as I will review episode 69, no sexual jokes, episode 69 of Dragon Ball Super. So let's get started. So, for those of you who are familiar with, obviously, the Dr. Slump series, you guys would have known that earlier in the Dragon Ball arc, during the General Blue saga, there was a point in time where Goku actually took a visit to Penguin Village. And this episode opens up playing the actual Dr. Slump theme, and I actually made sure that I actually put the actual Dr. Slump theme as the instrumental version so you guys could actually hear that at the beginning of this video. And I thought that was a very interesting twist that they actually did to open this episode up, obviously after the actual super intro itself. So it's literally like you have two intros to start off an episode, and we find out later on that Dr. Norimaki, who obviously is the guy who created Arale, he's going over to West City for a science convention. So this is already a very interesting plot because we're seeing a situation in which we're seeing Bulma, Norimaki, and a lot of other scientists kind of competing. So it's a different type of competition from all of the fights we've seen in Dragon Ball. And over there we see that Vegeta is at this convention. He's as grumpy as ever. And the one thing that I felt was the first thing that caught my eye is that Trunks is not older, guys. Everybody was possibly speculating that, you know, Trunks was going to get a lot older because of his appearance. And that's not really the case. He just looked a lot more mature in this suit that he's wearing. So, we're also seeing a part of this episode too where we see Goku with Rico Suave hair, and he's pretty much working as a security guard. And I actually thought that was very interesting because when I was looking at the original previews, before I heard it was actually Goku, I thought that was Gohan because his appearance kind of seemed a lot more similar to Gohan with the hair actually moving that way. And I also originally thought because of the whole thing about how Saiyan's hair never changes, that would be Goku. But if you really think about it, if you look at Saiyan here, it can be altered. It's just that the natural hair type would always go towards that actual natural form. So it's not like if you cut a Saiyan's hair, it's not going to, you know, obviously not stay cut. It's just the fact that its natural form would always take that shape. So that was something interesting there. So, at the convention, we see that Dr. Norimaki, he wins the convention for his Reality Machine 2. And as you actually would see in the episode, the way this machine works is that it pretty much takes whatever you're thinking and actually makes a physical manifestation of it. And we saw earlier that, you know, for an example, there was a dirty magazine that popped out as a result of an example. And I actually thought it would have made the episode a little bit cooler if Roshi was there, because if we saw Roshi with that machine, we could only imagine some of the things that he would do. And later on, you know, after Norimaki wins this award, Dr. Mashirito comes into play, and he's obviously dead for those of you who are familiar with the Dr. Slump series, but typical Dragon Ball and typical Toriyama, we see a situation where they're kind of just writing him into the story for fun. And this episode broke the fourth wall about 3 or 4 times, in which they're kind of pretty much implying that this is all a comic book and a story and not really a world in itself. And I always felt that was kind of interesting because Dragon Ball doesn't always break the fourth wall. It's very rare, and there are a few exceptions that I can go back and actually point out to where it has done some things like this, mostly in fuller. But that was very interesting how they broke the fourth wall and bring Dr. Mashirito back. And he illustrates that he has this chemical called Playtine-X, which increases a child's desire to play. And in this instance, the kids that were obviously being affected by this would be Arale and the Gotchins. The Gotchins would be those two angel-like creatures that were hanging out with Arale, and I'll explain a little bit more about them later on. I did some research before doing this review, and pretty much as a result of this Playtine-X, Arale's like super hyper, she's like destroying everything, the Gotchins are eating everything, and everybody's in trouble. So what did they do? They get into a big fight with Vegeta, but it's more so Arale versus Vegeta than anything else. And in the process, before Arale fights Vegeta, she literally wrecks Hercule or Mr. Satan when he actually tries to talk to her to calm her down. She like freaking pushes him and he gets smashed on the wall. Kind of similar to how in Dragon Ball Z when Trunks is fighting against Hercule and he taps him on the face and Hercule pretty much gets slammed on the wall but then like plays it off. So that was really cool. So we get to a very funny part of this episode here where Vegeta begins to fight Arale. And she actually hurts him pretty fucking bad. Vegeta manages to hit Arale so hard that he knocks her head off. And he also like flings her all across the world. But she immediately comes back and hits him. Circles the globe instantly. And the funny thing is that we also see that, you know, Vegeta's obviously talking more about breaking the fourth wall, saying that how she's like a comic book gag character and Arale's like splitting the earth in half. And the funniest part about all of this, guys, that I'm actually going to use for my thumbnail is that Arale headbutts Vegeta, literally taking, I guess you could say, in terms of Dragon Ball, a shot back towards, you know, the Dragon Ball arc in which, you know, Arale pretty much knocked out General Blue, and then afterwards, obviously, you know, General Blue was a threat to all the characters at that point. Obviously, you know, Goku, Bulma, Krillin, all these characters, you know, at a certain point were struggling with him. And Arale just easily takes him out. And at that point in the series, you know, Arale was a lot stronger than Goku. And the crazy thing about all of this, guys, was the fact that back in Dragon Ball, Toriyama made a statement that if Arale were to fight Goku, she would probably win. Now, that was back in Dragon Ball. Now, she's fighting Vegeta in his base form after how much stronger he's gotten, and she's going toe-to-toe with Super Saiyan Blue Goku, and it's not supposed to make sense. It's really funny. So, everybody's pretty much in danger. Bulma's trying to figure out a way to, you know, stop Arale from going on her rampage. And she wants to get Beerus to help. So, what they do in the meantime is they try to consult Dr. Mashirito to stop Arale, and they come up with an idea to stall her with poop. And as you guys would know, Dragon Ball's kind of made some references with the whole poop affiliation, where in Resurrection F, if you guys remember, Whis actually stepped on the poop when Goku and Vegeta were training with him. That was kind of taking a nod back to Dr.Slump. And the funny thing is, they're all struggling. They're all trying to find a way to stop Arale. So Bulma goes to the reality machine and she tries to get the world to think of the most delicious food possible so that they can attract Beerus. Beerus instantly comes there, you know, completely throwing away that whole, you know, 20-30 minutes it takes to get to Earth. And Beerus immediately shows up. He wipes out Mashirito instantly, you know, after Mashirito was bad talking him, and he eats the food. And, you know, typical Arale acting very childish in nature, even though she's not really, I guess you could say in terms of human years, she's not really a kid because she's really an android, you know, being created by Dr. Norimaki. You know, she insults Beerus, calling him a cat. He gets pissed off, pushes her aside. Her head is pretty much split, and I thought that was crazy. And he's gonna literally nuke her, but he needs to use the bathroom. Which pretty much, guys, as you guys would know before, in all of these filler episodes always end with nothing really being gained because they have to keep the story the same way. And Beerus leaves. Dr. Norimaki apologizes, and Vegeta is left in a tree. Awesome shit, guys. I mean, I loved this episode in terms of its plot. And to talk about some of the other elements here, guys, in terms of action, I thought it was really cool. I thought the animation was, you know, very simple and fun. It had a very comic book themed feeling towards it, where we see how when Arale headbutts Vegeta, we see, like, you know, that little, you know, spark that comes out every time, like you see a comic book character punching each other. I thought it was very funny. It wasn't a very serious fight, but I definitely was having a blast seeing, you know, Arale giving Goku as a Super Saiyan Blue and Vegeta problems. And the funny thing is, guys, is that I have a video coming out very soon called the top 10 strongest Dragon Ball women. All of you who are watching this review, you guys would see that in the future. And I have to completely change my power scaling now because I originally had Arale a lot lower because I thought she would be stronger than Dragon Ball characters but not stronger than Z. But now seeing after she's competing with Super Saiyan Blues, I have to push her a lot higher. So, in terms of, some of the interesting details in this episode, guys, for those of you who might not be familiar, the Gachins have a very interesting story that I was researching before doing this episode. Pretty much Kami, and in Dr. Slump, the Kami is actually a Master Roshi-esque looking character with like a dot on his forehead. He pretty much sent these Gachins to Earth to prevent humanity from evolving. He wanted humanity to stay primitive. And later on, he changed his mind because when he looked at Penguin Village and he kind of saw how they were kind of a peaceful society in some way, he kind of decided to just kind of let them be and, to advance and stuff. So that was very cool. And also another interesting detail in terms of gag characters. If you guys are familiar with One Punch Man, this episode kind of reminded me of One Punch Man, how like he's just written to like take everybody out with a punch, no matter how strong, how weak they are. Saitama could take him out with a punch. And that kind of reminded me, obviously on another scale towards Arale, how she's this really, the sweet, android character, and she's just knocking all these characters who've trained so long, to get to where they are, and obviously breaking the fourth wall, obviously exaggerated that. So I definitely felt the One Punch Man, element fed towards it. And in terms of power scaling, guys, as I mentioned before, I don't, there's a very hard way to scale how strong you would think Arale is. I'm giving you kind of a heads up for my future video. But in terms of power scaling, I would probably guess Arale would probably have to be, probably strong, like on par with Super Saiyan Blues, but definitely weaker than Beerus. So if Arale fought against Zamasu, maybe she wouldn't win, but she'd probably do some damage. I mean, considering how much problems she was giving them. So really, she's really on Super Saiyan God tier when you look at how she was playing in this episode, when we saw her getting into a beam clash with Goku's Kamehameha. And it did seem like Goku was putting a lot of energy because obviously he went Super Saiyan Blue. And in terms of memorable moments, guys, I would have to say it would have to be when Arale headbutts Vegeta. I thought that was the funniest moment. The way you see Vegeta like flying away, and then we see later on in the episode how he's like, I'm never gonna fight a gag character again. It's just funny because Vegeta's so serious and like he's just being thrown around. It was a very, very, very fun episode. So for my key discussion of today's, episode review, guys, I always like hearing back from you guys. Do you guys want to see Dr. Slump or any of, Toriyama's other crossovers into Dragon Ball Super? We could take Nico Majin Z, we could take more of the Jocko series. Well, Jocko's kind of already a part of Dragon Ball Super. We obviously have Dr. Slump, and there's a lot of one-shot mangas or, side stories that Toriyama has written before. He wrote a story about like a mayor. There's a lot of little interesting things that Toriyama has written, and I'd really, think it would be cool if Dragon Ball Super could include all those things. And let me know, guys, like let me know what, crossovers you'd like to see with Dragon Ball Super that are not just Toriyama stories. What anime do you think would really work with it? Because I think it'd be really fun. So overall, guys, I thought it was a very fun episode. I'm gonna have to give it 5 stars just because it was fun. It wasn't a serious episode. You can't take it too serious. I just really enjoyed watching it, and I really like these type of filler episodes where they really add a very creative, compact story all in one. It was a great episode, and I had a lot of fun, and I look forward to, the next episode. We're gonna see a baseball game. So in terms of my prediction, guys, it was cool seeing a Super Saiyan Blue playing baseball, and it's also fun seeing Yamcha coming back, because if you guys remember from Dragon Ball Z, Yamcha played for the Titans, which was like the baseball team that he was a part of. And in terms of predictions, I predicted Beerus' team will lose. And the reason I say this is that gag stories always end up the same way because they have to keep the story the same. Champa's probably going to come to Earth because he's going to make a bet. And in order to keep everything the same way it was before, it only makes sense for our guys to lose on some type of technicality at the end, kind of for Champa to get something on his own way and to kind of just leave the story on like a funny note. It kind of reminds me like in Dragon Ball GT where Goku lost to that little, skinny, nerdy kid in the tournament, just to kind of add a fun twist to the story. And that's pretty much my prediction, guys. Let me know whose team you think is going to win this baseball game. Curious to hear your thoughts. So with everything else said, please remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. And remember, as I say, Have a great day, guys.